Hey Wargamers, today I want to talk about the new Bolter Discipline beta rule and how it might actually work out to be a positive thing for Tau in the meta. Before we do that though, I want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, go ahead, hit subscribe, that way you don't miss any kind of content. Okay, so the new beta rule applies to Adeptus Astartes and Heretic Astartes keyword units and essentially modifies the way that their bolters work, or anything that has the bolter word in its name or description. So including combi bolters and things like that. So a very diverse array of weapons are affected by this. But what it does is it means that there are actually 3 different ways that they can get the full benefit of that weapon profile. It used to be that, if you're within half range, you would get to fire twice. Now there are 2 other cases where that can happen. The first is if you haven't moved in the previous movement phase, which of course applies to things like Overwatch automatically, unless something crazy happened. And then also if the unit is a Biker, Centurion, Vehicle, or Terminator, they will always have access to the full benefit of a rapid fire weapon. Overall, this means a change in the value of certain units inside the Space Marine Army list. Essentially, we're just getting more volume of fire from a lot of different units, and that means that in a lot of cases, they are going to be worth twice the value that they were before, which has a pretty sizable impact on their point efficiency if you think about it. We're doubling the damage output of a lot of units in a lot of different scenarios, and that's meaningful. So we could see things like more Intercessors, more Land Raider Crusaders, anything like that we could certainly see more of. Now, I don't know if those changes are enough to actually make a dent in the meta, right? Like if an army is already built to take out Orcs or to take out Knights, a Land Raider or a bunch of Intercessors aren't going to necessarily make a big difference. And so maybe those players are going to opt for their original list instead and forego the potential benefit that they would receive to bolt weapons because it simply doesn't make that big of a difference for them, even though those units are in some cases more point efficient now. So that might not happen. But if it does, I think we could see some really interesting things happen with the meta. Primarily, we would see armies be built to take out more orky lists, right? If we're talking about increasing the volume of fire, that is beneficial across the board. But really, these changes are going to be beneficial in combating Orcs, which seem to be rising to the top of the meta right now. So Space Marines are getting a bump against Orcs, they're getting a bump against other types of, low toughness Xenos armies. If we're talking about like Eldar, for example, having more shots is good. If we're talking about Gene Stealer cults, more shots is good. Tyranids, more shots is good. You can go down the list. You can come up with pretty much a whole list of armies that this is a beneficial thing for or against. And for that reason, we might see people adopt this. But for Tau, I'm not too concerned about it. And the reason for that is that this change is in some ways a trap for Space Marine players if they are facing Tau. So if we're just using the normal rapid fire rules, it's exactly the same as before. So there's no gain or loss there. But for things like vehicles becoming more beneficial or more point efficient, using these beta rules, Tau don't really have a huge problem with vehicles, right? Like we have Riptides, we have Fusion Blasters, we have Cyclic Ion Blasters, we have a whole suite of weapons that we can use to take out those vehicles, and we can do so at a reasonable range from relatively reliable units. Now, of course, the ballistic skill could be improved, but still, Tau don't suffer with taking out things like Land Raiders, really. It's not that big of an issue. And so if armies are shifting towards taking more Land Raiders or taking more infantry, Tau should be able to handle that fairly well and not be a major loser in that exchange. So I think that's a benefit there. And then additionally, if the Space Marine player is taking advantage of the stand and shoot option, right? So if they don't move, then they can fire their full salvo of rapid fire shots. That's still good for us, right? Because we don't want them coming towards us. We don't want a Space Marine army right next to us. We would prefer that they stay far away. So if they don't move, great, that's just fine. That also gives us more ability to move and capture objectives. If Space Marines have to stand and shoot, that allows some of our more mobile units to really shine and take those objectives and win the game. So again, both of these scenarios, I'm not worried about how a Tau army will fare, because either they're giving up their movement phase and their tactical advantage on the board, or they're taking units that really aren't an issue for Tau to deal with. So overall, this might be advantageous for them in the meta in taking out certain Xenos armies, but Tau shouldn't be one of them. Tau should be something that is relatively strong against this potential meta shift. And that means that overall the meta is going to be a little bit more rock, paper, scissors with regard to Space Marine armies. Not saying that's a bad thing, right? I mean, if Space Marine armies are just suffering across the board right now, being a little bit more rock, paper, scissors can be fine because, they can only do better in a lot of cases, which of course is how this rule is phrased, right? You still get the same benefit that you had on rapid fire weapons, but now you get these other options as well, which, makes sense. So I think that this can really work out beneficially for Tau in the long run, right? If we're seeing a shift towards Space Marine armies, that just makes Tau that much more competitive. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you're playing with the beta rule, does this actually align with what you're seeing, or is it completely made up and doesn't make any sense? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and of course, happy wargaming. Hey everyone, this video is made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over there as well. Special thanks to No Excuses Panda, Scott Heater, Tao Oswald, Nick Steele, Jared Egler, Scott J. Smith, Stephen Cohen, Brian Mann, Jake Johnson, Eric Jackson, Benjamin, RP, Julian Peck, Andy M. Young, Peter Benjamin Parker, and Giovanni DiMaggio.